Hey there, kid, welcome. Today I'm going to take you on a journey back through the dusty pages of history to a time when the world was in turmoil. Close your eyes and listen closely, because this story isn't just about lands and battles. It's about faith, transformation, and the reshaping of human history. As the grand columns of the Roman Empire began to crack, a new force was rising just beyond its borders. A force that had waited patiently for centuries. They were known as the Barbarians, often labeled as wild, unruly, and destructive. But the truth is, they didn't just destroy, they also built a new world. Alexis Volvo proclaimed the new springtime. Today you're going to hear the stories of these peoples who redrew Europe's destiny after the fall of Rome. From the westward migrations of the Visigoths to the rise of the Franks and the Ostrogoths' rule over Italy. Each one left a mark that changed the course of history. So take a deep breath and picture this new world rising out of the mist before your eyes. Let's open the doors to the age of the Barbarian Kingdoms together. Ready, kid? All right then, let's dive in. Kid. Let me take you back to one of the most turbulent times in human history. The mighty walls and grand columns of the Roman Empire stood tall for centuries, but no empire lasts forever. The fall of this great civilization left behind an empty throne and a world plunged into chaos. And in that void, the barbarians rose to power, ushering Europe to the brink of a new era. Picture this. It's 476 AD. Historians consider this the year the Western Roman Empire officially came to an end. A Germanic commander named Odoacer overthrew the young emperor Romulus Augustulus and declared himself king of Italy. But this wasn't just about removing a boy from the throne. It marked the final act of the ancient world and the opening scene of a new age. Still, Rome's collapse wasn't some overnight disaster. The empire had been weakening for centuries, plagued by internal conflicts, economic struggles, constant power grabs, and relentless barbarian invasions. These invasions by the Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Huns weren't just attacks on Rome's borders. They were driven by dreams of building their own order. The barbarian peoples had lived on the edges of Roman territory for generations. At first they were allies or hired soldiers, but as Rome's authority crumbled, they began to infiltrate, settle, and eventually rebel. The empire's borders were no longer impenetrable walls. As Rome's systems of governance unraveled, barbarian leaders seized the opportunity to carve out their own kingdoms. Now think about it, kid. How did the vacuum left by a fallen empire pave the way for new powers to rise? A Europe where authority was shattered, laws were weakened, and the stage was set for transformation. Barbarian leaders weren't just warriors, they were strategists. They learned from Rome's legacy and took lessons from its downfall. Each one was determined to write their name on a new page of history. This was a threshold, a moment where one era ended and another began. The fall of Rome and the rise of the barbarian kingdoms reshaped Europe's political, cultural, and religious landscape. This isn't just a story of battles and invasions, it's a story of transformation. Take a deep breath, because now I'm taking you to the triumphant age of the barbarians. My child, let me take you to the story of a people who rose in the wake of Rome's glory days. The Visigoths. Their name echoes through the winds of history as a brave and warrior-like nation. But seeing them as mere invaders would be a mistake. The Visigoths didn't just destroy, they built something new. Their story begins beyond the borders of the Roman Empire, in the lands we now know as Germany. For years they clashed with Rome's powerful legions, sometimes as allies, other times as enemies. But by the late 4th century, a new force emerged from the east, the Huns. As the Huns pushed westward, the Visigoths were forced to move. searching for a new homeland. They turned to Rome for refuge. And so, in 376 AD, the Visigoths crossed the Danube River and entered Roman territory. The empire saw them as a useful resource, employing them as border guards and mercenaries. But Rome's neglect and mistreatment ignited a fire of rebellion within the Visigothic people. Hunger, poverty, and injustice became unbearable. The more stress and uncertainty, the more rebellion within the Visigoths became unbearable. In 378 AD, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Visigoths dealt a crushing blow to the Roman army, marking a turning point they would never return from. But the real turning point came in 410 AD. On this fateful day, under the leadership of King Alaric, the Visigoths reached the gates of Rome. This ancient city, believed to be unassailable for centuries, was sacked by the so-called barbarians. The people of Rome were paralyzed with fear. Many historians view this event as a symbolic beginning of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But Alaric and his people didn't seek to destroy Rome. They aimed to build a new order. After the sack of Rome, the Visigoths moved on. For them, the event was just a step in their journey toward finding a permanent home. Their search finally ended on the Iberian Peninsula, in what is now Spain. In 418 AD, they established a Visigothic kingdom based in Toulouse. This kingdom quickly expanded across Iberia, becoming one of the first barbarian kingdoms in Europe. But the Visigothic kingdom wasn't just a story of military success. These people built on Rome's legacy, developing their own culture and legal systems. They embraced Christianity in Spain, driving significant religious transformation in the region. Particularly notable was King Record II's conversion to Catholicism in the 6th century, which unified the kingdom politically and religiously. Now think, my child, how does a nation rise from the remnants of a great empire to build its own legacy? The Visigoths became key players in ushering Europe into a new age. Their story isn't just about conquest and plunder. It's about the cultural and political legacy they left behind. Take a deep breath, for this tale is far from over. Young friend, let me take you to the tale of another barbarian kingdom that rose in the wake of the Roman Empire's fall, nestled in the heart of Italy. This is the story of the Ostrogoths and their wise leader Theodoric, a tale of building order and light in the dark days of Europe. The Ostrogoths, as their name suggests, were a branch of the Gothic people. Just as the Visigoths made their mark in the west, the Ostrogoths held sway in the east, near the borders of the Eastern Roman Empire. Like their western kin, their story was shaped by a great migration, spurred by the pressure of the Huns. After the death of the Hun leader Attila, the Ostrogoths regained their independence and established more direct ties with Rome. But their destiny truly changed with the rise of their leader, Theodoric. By the late 5th century, Theodoric took charge of the Ostrogoths and transformed them from a wandering warrior tribe into an organized power. At a time when Rome was collapsing into chaos, Italy yearned for new leadership. Enter Theodoric. In 488 AD, the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno made Theodoric an offer. He would send the Ostrogoths to Italy to replace Odoacer, who ruled over what was left of the Western Empire. Seeing an opportunity, Theodoric led his people on a long journey to Italy. In 493 AD, he defeated Odoacer and established the Ostrogothic kingdom in Italy. Now think, young friend, how could a barbarian leader build order in Italy, the very heart of Roman civilization? That's where Theodoric's greatness shines. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a statesman. He embraced Rome's cultural heritage with deep respect and sought to preserve it. Theodoric's court reflected the grandeur of Roman palaces, and his Ostrogothic army mirrored the discipline of Roman legions. Theodoric worked to bring peace and stability to Italy. He strove to create a system where Goths and Romans could coexist. While the Ostrogoths were known as warriors, Theodoric won over the local population by safeguarding Rome's cultural and social traditions. He even introduced laws blending the legal systems of the Goths and Romans to ease tensions within society. Of course, this new order wasn't without its challenges. The religious divide between the Arian Christianity of the Goths and the Catholicism of the Romans created tension. Yet Theodoric's pragmatic leadership managed to keep this conflict under control for a time. While the full glory of Rome was never restored, Italy experienced a measure of stability under the Ostrogothic kingdom. Theodoric's story is a rare example of a barbarian leader proving himself not just as a conqueror but as a capable and visionary ruler. After his death, the Ostrogothic kingdom weakened and was eventually absorbed by the Byzantine Empire. Yet, this short-lived kingdom left a lasting mark on history, playing a vital role in Europe's transition to the Middle Ages. Now close your eyes and imagine those days. A new order rising from the ruins of Rome, lands brought back to life by the vision of one leader. The story of the Ostrogoths is a part of our history waiting to be told, and we, as storytellers, keep their legacy alive. Young friend, let me take you to the lush green lands of Gaul, to a time after the fall of the Roman Empire, when a new power began to rise. This is the story of the Franks and their first great leader, Clovis. The history of the Franks is not just the tale of a single people. It's the story of how the political and cultural map of Europe was redrawn. The Frankish tribes originally lived along the northeastern banks of the Rhine River. As the Roman Empire weakened, these tribes began to move slowly into Roman territory, eventually settling in Gaul. Gaul had been one of Rome's most important provinces, but with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, it became a land of chaos, a battlefield for various tribes. Amid this turmoil, the Franks emerged as a dominant force, carving out a home in Gaul. But the Franks truly rose to prominence under the leadership of Clovis. Crowned king in 481 AD, Clovis was not just a warrior, he was a master strategist. He united the Frankish tribes under one banner, transforming them into a powerful nation. Yet what truly set Clovis apart wasn't just his military victories. It was the pivotal decisions he made as a spiritual and political leader. One of the most significant moments in Clovis's life was his conversion to Christianity. According to legend, Clovis found himself in a dire situation during a battle and vowed to convert to Christianity if he emerged victorious. When the tide of the battle turned in his favor, Clovis and his warriors were baptized together, embracing Catholic Christianity. This decision didn't just change Clovis's fate, it altered the course of history for the Franks. Now think of it, young friend. At that time, Christianity in Europe was deeply divided among various sects. While many barbarian tribes adhered to Arian Christianity, Clovis chose Catholicism, aligning himself with the Roman Catholic Church. This choice gave the Franks a significant political advantage, earning them the Church's support and establishing their kingdom as a key player in European affairs. Under Clovis's rule, the Frankish kingdom grew stronger, consolidating power over Gaul and becoming a central force in the region. After his death, the kingdom was passed down to his descendants, the Merovingians, who continued to expand its influence. For centuries, the Merovingian dynasty ruled over the Franks, their legacy cemented in European history. But as with all great powers, the Merovingians eventually faltered. Internal strife and ineffective leadership weakened their hold on power. Yet the foundations they laid would endure, shaping the future of Europe. The rise of the Franks under Clovis set the stage for the formation of modern European kingdoms. Now close your eyes and imagine Clovis standing tall on the battlefield, leading his warriors to victory, his solemn resolve as he embraced a new faith alongside his people, the dawn of a new era as the Franks united under a single leader. This is the story of the Franks, a tale of a fragmented people forged into a nation, of a leader whose vision shaped the future. These stories echo through the misty pages of history, and it is our duty to keep them alive. Young friend, Now let me guide you to a land shrouded in mist. Britain in the wake of Rome's withdrawal. This is the story of chaos, transformation, and the rise of the Anglo-Saxons. Listen and imagine. Once, Britain was one of the most distant and prized provinces of the Roman Empire. The Romans built roads, fortresses, and cities here, turning the island into a hub of military and commercial activity. But in 410 AD, under mounting internal and external pressures, the Roman Empire withdrew its forces from Britain. This sudden departure left a massive power vacuum. The local population, long accustomed to the protection of Roman law and fortifications, found themselves vulnerable and leaderless. During this time, Britain was under constant threat from the Picts and Scots in the north and Irish raiders from the west. The local leaders lacked the strength to repel these incursions. It was in this moment of vulnerability that the Anglo-Saxons entered the stage of history. The Anglo-Saxons were not one people, but a collection of Germanic tribes, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, hailing from what is now Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. Initially, these groups were invited as mercenaries to assist the local rulers in defending their lands. However, they soon realized the opportunities offered by Britain's fertile lands and decided to settle permanently. The arrival of the Anglo-Saxon tribes marked the beginning of a new era for Britain. They brought with them their culture, language, and way of life, which began to blend with the remnants of Roman influence. Various tribes settled across different parts of Britain, establishing small kingdoms. Names like Kent, Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, and East Anglia emerged as centers of power, reshaping the island's political landscape. What's remarkable about this period is that Anglo-Saxon kingdoms thrived not only through military conquest, but also through cultural and social development. For instance, the Kingdom of Kent played a pivotal role in the spread of Christianity among the Anglo-Saxons. Wessex, in later centuries, became a central player in the unification of England. Mercia, with its military might and trade networks, became one of the most influential kingdoms of its time. The Anglo-Saxon settlement in Britain altered the island's political structure and its cultural identity. Latin gave way to Germanic languages and the landscape transformed as old Roman cities fell into ruin while new villages and towns emerged. Pagan beliefs clashed and eventually intertwined with Christianity, shaping Britain's evolving spiritual identity. Ah, young friend, the story of the Anglo-Saxons is not just one of migration. It is the tale of a people forging a new identity and laying the foundations for modern Britain. Imagine the grand Roman villas and fortresses slowly being reclaimed by nature, while the sturdy yet simple homes of the Anglo-Saxons rose as heralds of a new age. These changes planted the seeds of a legacy that still echoes in England's cultural and historical heritage today. Now, close your eyes and picture it. Through the mist, Anglo-Saxon ships approach the British shores. Brave warriors and families disembark, filled with the hope and determination to build new lives. This is the beginning of an epic tale, a story that resonates through the foggy chapters of history, carrying with it countless other stories yet to be told. Ah, dear friend, let me take you to the tale of another remarkable people, the Burgundians. A story of both a new beginning and an inevitable end. Listen closely, for the rise and fall of the Kingdom of Burgundy marks a pivotal chapter in the shaping of Europe. The Burgundians were a Germanic people, their origins tracing back to the cold shores of Scandinavia. Their early home lay by the Baltic Sea, but over time they began a southward migration in search of more fertile lands and escape from external threats. By the early 5th century AD, the Burgundians had settled on the western banks of the Rhine, within the waning borders of the Roman Empire. With Rome's power diminishing, the Burgundians seized the opportunity to carve out a place for themselves. Initially allies of Rome, they eventually grew bold enough to establish their own independent kingdom. Thus, in 443 AD, the Kingdom of Burgundy was officially founded in the fertile Rhone Valley in what is now southeastern France. The Kingdom of Burgundy thrived, not only as a military power but also as a cultural hub. Influenced by Roman civilization, the Burgundians adopted many aspects of Roman law and administration. They developed a legal code known as Lex Burgundionum, which blended Roman and Germanic traditions, a groundbreaking system for its time. The capital, Lyon, was more than just an administrative center. It became a bustling hub of trade and culture. Strategically located, Burgundy connected various regions of Europe through commerce. Burgundian textiles and metalwork were among the finest of their era. The Burgundians also embraced Christianity, fostering the construction of churches and monasteries that enriched the region's spiritual and cultural life. In addition to their cultural and economic achievements, the Burgundians built a formidable military to defend against powerful neighbors like the Franks and Visigoths. Their army ensured the kingdom's survival for decades amidst the turbulent backdrop of early medieval Europe. But no kingdom lasts forever, does it, my friend? Burgundy too was subject to this universal truth. By the mid-6th century, the Frankish kingdom under the Merovingians had grown powerful, setting its sights on Burgundy. To the Franks, Burgundy was not just a rival, but a prize of strategic and cultural value. The end came in 534 AD, when the Frankish king Clothar I and his brother Theodoric invaded and annexed the kingdom of Burgundy. From that moment, Burgundy became part of the Frankish kingdom, yet its legacy endured. Burgundian laws and traditions were incorporated into Frankish governance, leaving an indelible mark. Ah, my friend, the story of Burgundy is not merely one of rise and fall. It is also a testament to the fusion of cultures and the creation of a lasting legacy. The blending of Roman heritage with Germanic tradition in Burgundy became a cornerstone of European identity. Now, close your eyes and imagine. The Rhone Valley, its verdant fields dotted with Burgundian villages intertwined with Roman structures. People living lives that meld ancient customs with new laws. And through the ebb and flow of history, their voices fade, but their influence endures. The echoes of Burgundy's story still resonate in the fabric of Europe today, a legacy of resilience, transformation, and unity. Ah, my friend, let me take you from the cold lands of the West to the story of a people who stormed through Europe like lightning on horseback, the Huns. This story only lasted a few decades, but the impact they made on history is undeniable. If you're ready, let's take a journey into this turbulent time, woven with legends. The Huns, that fearless tribe that came from the vast steppes of Central Asia and changed the course of Europe's fate. Their arrival was like a storm, sudden, intense, and unstoppable. In the late 4th century AD, the Huns began migrating westward from Central Asia, first taking control of the steppes north of the Black Sea. Along the way, they displaced the Goths, Gepids, and other barbarian tribes, and moved deeper into the heart of Europe. But the real mark the Huns left on history began with their great leader, Attila. In 434 AD, Attila and his brother Bleda took over the leadership of the Hunnic Empire. Soon after, Attila became the sole ruler, eliminating his brother. Historians remember him not only as a military genius, but also as a strategic mastermind. Attila was skilled not just in the power of sword and shield, but also in diplomacy and the art of fear. The Hunnic armies came down on Europe like a meteor. One of their biggest battles was in 451 AD, the famous Battle of the Carolingian Plains, where Attila faced off against the combined armies of the Roman Empire and barbarian tribes. Although he didn't win the battle, Attila managed to instill deep fear across Europe. During this time, he earned the title, the Scourge of God, and made his empire so powerful that both the Eastern and Western Roman empires were forced to kneel before him. The Huns' presence in Europe wasn't just about conquest. They left a lasting impact on the barbarian tribes around them. The Huns revolutionized warfare with their speed and agility. Their mounted troops, able to cover long distances quickly, and their skillful use of composite bows, inspired the barbarian tribes to develop their own tactics. tribes like the Goths, Vandals, and Gepids reorganized their armies based on the Huns' military strategies. But this change wasn't just on the battlefield. With the Huns' arrival, new alliances were formed and power dynamics shifted. The fear and chaos they created reshaped Europe's political landscape. The Huns were also influential in diplomacy and politics. Attila acted as a mediator between the barbarian tribes and the Roman Empire, while also protecting his own interests. This period added layers of complexity to the political intrigue and power struggles in Europe. But like all empires, the Hunnic Empire didn't last forever. Attila's sudden death in 453 AD marked a turning point for the Huns. The loss of their leader led to infighting and factional struggles within the empire. The battles between Attila's sons weakened the Huns and sparked revolts from the barbarian tribes. In 454 AD, the Battle of Nidau became the decisive defeat that ended the Hunnic Empire. The Huns were crushed by a united barbarian army led by Gepid chieftain Ardaric. This defeat marked the end of Hunnic dominance in Europe. The remaining Huns withdrew eastward, but they never regained the power they once held on the European stage. The fall of the Huns opened the door for a new era for the barbarian tribes of Europe. These tribes filled the power vacuum left by the Huns and established their own kingdoms. The Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, and Franks inherited the Huns' legacy in different ways and helped shape the new political order in Europe. And so, my friend, the short but powerful story of the Huns comes to an end. Attila and his people didn't just leave behind conquests. They shaped the history and future of Europe and the fate of barbarian kingdoms. Now close your eyes and imagine Attila's armies, riding with the winds of the vast steppes at their backs, charging into the heart of Europe. On one side, the gleam of steel armor. On the other, the deep echoes of history. That's the story of the Huns, and those echoes still resonate today. Ah, my dear friend. Once again, we're diving into the mysterious world of barbarian kingdoms. This time, we'll take a closer look at how they established their kingdoms, governed them, and shaped their military power. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe was filled with a mosaic of various barbarian kingdoms. While each built its own unique structure, they were all influenced by the legacy of Rome. Let's take a journey deep into the heart of this fascinating system. The foundation of the barbarian kingdoms was mostly laid by strong leaders and their loyal warriors. Tribes like the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Franks, and Anglo-Saxons saw the leaders' personal charisma and military achievements play a crucial role in the establishment of their kingdoms. Kings usually rose to power as warriors who had gained the trust of the people, or as leaders who had rescued them from hard times. But just as it took a battle to claim the throne, it also took a battle to hold on to it. Barbarian kings used several key methods to strengthen their authority. First and foremost, it was common to establish an elite guard of loyal warriors. These warriors served both as a security shield and the strongest supporters of the king. To ensure their loyalty, kings rewarded them with loot, land, and titles. Additionally, marriages and diplomacy were important ways to secure political alliances and reinforce authority. For example, the Frankish king Clovis's marriage to a Christian princess strengthened both his religious and political power. Such strategic marriages also helped barbarian kingdoms establish connections with powerful institutions like the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Empire profoundly influenced the governance of the barbarian kingdoms. Barbarian leaders often kept the existing administrative and legal structures intact in the territories they conquered. There were two main reasons for this. First, the Roman administrative system was highly efficient. Second, it was necessary to win the loyalty of the conquered peoples. For example, Ostrogothic King Theodoric largely preserved the legal and administrative structure of Rome. He maintained the Senate, kept local officials in place, and continued to implement Roman laws. Similarly, the Visigoths and Franks adapted Roman laws for their own people. This helped reduce the likelihood of rebellion among the conquered peoples, while also giving the barbarian leaders legitimacy. However, this process wasn't just about copying Rome. The barbarian kingdoms blended the structures they inherited from Rome with their own traditions. For example, the Visigoths combined Rome's written laws with their traditional oral legal systems to create the Codex Euritianus, a legal system that provided a framework for justice that both local and barbarian peoples could rely on. Another notable feature of the barbarian kingdom's governance was the rise of local governance. The collapse of Rome's central authority gave more power to local rulers and landowners. This shift laid the foundations for the feudal system. Barbarian kings needed local leaders to govern their vast territories. These leaders could be appointed governors, military commanders, or powerful local tribal chiefs. In exchange for their loyalty, they were granted large estates, and the administration of these lands was handed over to them. This model strengthened local authority and led to an increase in decentralization within the political structures of the barbarian kingdoms. Local rulers were responsible for collecting taxes from the people, organizing military forces, and ensuring justice was served. This setup can be seen as a precursor to the future feudal system. The Frankish kingdom is one of the most striking examples of this model. During the Merovingian and Carolingian periods, instead of establishing a strong central authority over vast lands, more power was given to local lords. The military strength of the barbarian kingdoms was also shaped by this local system. Kings relied on local leaders and the warriors they gathered to form armies during wartime. This made the military forces of the barbarian kingdoms flexible and mobile, but it also created opportunities for internal conflicts. Local leaders sometimes put their own interests before the king's. You see, my dear friend, the political and military structures of the barbarian kingdoms were like a stage where chaos and order danced together. Rome's legacy created a strong foundation for their governance, but their own traditions added a unique color to the structure. The barbarian kings walked in the shadow of Rome and in the light of their own peoples. And so, Europe's new order was built upon this fascinating blend. Now, close your eyes and think, a barbarian king, sword at his side, sitting in the middle of a grand hall with his loyal warriors around him. On one side, the glorious laws of Rome, on the other, the echoes of barbarian traditions. And that's where the true magic of this story lies. My friend, today I'm going to take you to the warm lands of Spain. The kingdom that the Visigoths established here still carries the echoes of an era that resonates deep in history. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Visigoths settled on these lands, built their own kingdom, and became one of Europe's most powerful states. But, as with every rise, there was also a fall, and their story in these lands ended in a dramatic fashion. But the Visigoths took control of Spain from the weakening authority of Rome and created a system of their own. In the 6th century, leaders like King Leovigild took major steps to unite and strengthen the Visigothic kingdom. Leovigild suppressed internal strife, solidified his rule, and expanded his territory. Under his reign, the Visigoths managed to bring almost all of Spain under a single political power. After Leovigild, his son Recard made perhaps the most significant decision that changed the kingdom's fate. In 589 AD, Recard abandoned Arianism and embraced Catholic Christianity. This decision allowed the Visigothic kingdom to align with the Roman Catholic Church and win the support of much of the population. At the same time, this religious shift made the kingdom more open to forming alliances with other Catholic powers in Europe. During the golden age of the Visigoths, Spain's great cities became centers of culture and trade. Toledo, as the capital, became the heart of political and religious life. Church councils held there not only shaped religious matters, but also influenced political decisions. During this time, the Visigoths developed a legal code called the Liber Uniciorum, which continued the Roman legal tradition while merging it with their own. This code regulated the justice system and helped maintain order among different segments of society. Unfortunately, like every kingdom, the Visigoths couldn't reign forever. In the early 8th century, political instability and internal divisions within the kingdom laid the groundwork for its decline. During King Roderic's reign, the Visigothic kingdom teetered on the edge of civil war. This weakness caught the attention of a new power that was advancing towards southern Spain, the Muslim Arabs and Berbers. In 711 AD, Muslim forces led by Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and landed on Visigothic soil. Legend has it that Tariq, turning to his army, told them that the ships had been burned and spoke the words, "There is no turning back, only victory lies ahead." This resolve made their progress unstoppable. Tariq's forces defeated King Roderic's army at the Battle of Guadalete later that same year. This battle marked the turning point that brought an end to the Visigothic kingdom. After the battle, the Muslims quickly took control of most of the Visigothic lands. As the Muslims established their civilization in these lands, which they called Al-Andalus, the legacy of the Visigoths lived on as the foundations of this new order. The fall of the Visigothic kingdom didn't mean their complete disappearance from history. On the contrary, Visigothic culture left a deep imprint on Spain's identity. Their contributions to art, architecture, and law played an important role in the development of both the Muslim rulers and later the Spanish Christian kingdoms. The Visigothic-style churches and stonework found in Toledo and other cities are tangible examples of this legacy. Furthermore, the strong ties the Visigoths formed with the Catholic Church left deep marks on Spain's future religious and political structure. Even during the Muslim rule in Al-Andalus, Visigothic area churches and laws continued to exist as part of the new order. My dear friend, the story of the Visigoths in Spain is like a tale where victory and tragedy intertwine. This people, who inherited the legacy of Rome, ruled Spain for a time, then withdrew from the stage of history, leaving behind indelible traces. The system they established in these lands echoed through the centuries. Now close your eyes and imagine wandering through the streets of Toledo during the golden age of the Visigoths. The city is bustling with palaces and churches, and the people are filled with both hope and the pride of being a part of history. What do you think? Doesn't the story of the Visigoths teach us that every rise has its fall, but the true legacy lies in the traces we leave behind? Oh, my dear friend, now I will take you to a stormy time in Italy. You will feel the battle cries echoing across the Ostrogoth lands, the struggles woven with strategies like a chess game, and finally, the last breath of a kingdom. The epic clash between Byzantine Emperor Justinian and the Ostrogoths marks not just the end of a kingdom, but the closing of an era. By the mid-6th century, the capable Byzantine Emperor Justinian had set out to revive the glory of the old Roman Empire. His goal was to regain control over the lands that had fallen into the hands of barbarian tribes after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. His most significant move in this effort was to take Italy, the heart of Rome itself, a cultural and historical symbol. At that time, Italy was under the control of the Ostrogoths. The Ostrogothic kingdom had weakened after the death of Theodoric, struggling with political infighting. Leaders like Vitiges were fighting to unite the people, but they faced many enemies both inside and outside their kingdom. In this environment, Justinian sent a large army to Italy. The army, led by capable commanders like Belisarius, was disciplined and determined. The Gothic War, which began in 535 AD, was the cornerstone of Byzantium's efforts to reconquer Italy. Belisarius first captured Sicily, which was under Ostrogothic control, and then advanced to the mainland. At first, the Ostrogoths struggled to counter this advance. Cities like Rome and Ravenna quickly fell into Byzantine hands. However, the Ostrogoths were not ready to give up. The emergence of Attila, a young and charismatic leader, gave the Ostrogoths new hope. Attila was known for his battlefield intelligence and his ability to win the hearts of the people. Under his leadership, the Ostrogoths united again and launched a series of successful attacks against the Byzantine forces. Attila even briefly recaptured Rome and continued to challenge Byzantium, defending its kingdom. But Justinian's determination and the superior resources of the Byzantines ultimately turned the tide. After Attila's death, the Ostrogoths weakened further. In 553 AD, the Byzantine armies achieved their final victory, and the Ostrogothic kingdom effectively ceased to exist. The fall of the Ostrogoths left deep scars in Italy. Years of war devastated agricultural lands, ruined cities, and plunged the people into poverty. While the Byzantine Empire managed to regain control of Italy, the cost of this victory was steep. The once glorious cities of Rome were now war-weary ruins. Even after their fall, the Ostrogoths left their legacy behind. As a people who had embraced and tried to preserve Roman culture, their efforts contributed to the cultural richness of Italy. However, Byzantine rule in Italy didn't last long. New barbarian tribes, like the Lombards, quickly eyed these lands and began to challenge Byzantium. My dear friend, the story of the Ostrogoths tells of how a once powerful people rose, fought, and ultimately vanished into the mists of history. This story reminds us that no matter how strong a civilization is, it can have its weak moments. Staying on the stage of history requires not only power, but also wisdom. Now, close your eyes. Picture the armies of Belisarius advancing through the smoke of the Gothic War, while Ostrogoth warriors try to stop them. In this turbulent period of history, every sword strike wrote a page. These pages have survived as stories that have much to teach us today. Don't you think the tragic yet captivating end of the Ostrogoths is one of the most unforgettable lessons history has to offer? My dear friend, now let us embark on a journey through the dark forests of Europe. Our journey will take us to the glorious rise of the Frankish kingdom and the foundation of the Carolingian dynasty, a story that illustrates how a barbarian people built a great civilization and played a central role in shaping the history of Europe. After the victories of Clovis, the Frankish kingdom had taken root in the land of Gaul and began to expand rapidly. Clovis's conversion to Christianity was not only a matter of faith, it was a political masterstroke. This move not only made the Franks a state supported by the Roman Church, but also sowed the seeds of a strong unity among the people. He tells the story in his letters. This is the story of Clovis, the later legend, how different it is from one people rock to another. The successors of Clovis carried this legacy forward. Initially, the kingdom was divided into regional territories, each governed by one of Clovis's sons. However, over time, this system gave way to the need for a more centralized authority. The Frankish kingdom quickly distinguished itself from other barbarian kingdoms due to its fertile lands, powerful armies, and effective governance. As the name indicates, Frankish lands stretch from the Rhine of Clovis to the conquest of the Turk Muslims. Notably, the leaders of the Merovingian dynasty employed both diplomacy and warfare to expand their territories. The heirs of Clovis not only expanded the borders of the kingdom but also strengthened the administrative system. During this period, the Frankish kingdom entered a transitional phase. The administrative structures inherited from Rome were blended with barbarian traditions, creating a new model of governance. The first sparks of feudalism also began to appear during this time. Powerful lords swore allegiance to the kings, governing their lands and raising armies. Many Frankish kings strengthened their alliances with the church. Christianity became not only a religion but also a tool of governance. While priests were responsible for the education of the people, they also played crucial roles in the administration of the kingdom. Monasteries became centers of knowledge and culture, and the Franks rose not just as a military force, but also as a cultural and religious power. Clovis's Frankish kingdom evolved into an imperial vision through the leadership of the Carolingian dynasty. During a time when the Merovingian dynasty weakened, powerful administrators with the title of Major Domus took the stage. This title meant the de facto rulers of the kingdom. One such ruler, Charles Martel, laid the foundation for a dynasty that would change the fate of Europe. Under Charles Martel's leadership, the Frankish armies won a decisive victory over the Islamic forces at the Battle of Tours. This victory secured not only the survival of the Frankish kingdom, but also of Christian Europe. After Charles, his son Pippin became king. marking the beginning of the Carolingian dynasty. And thus, Clovis's legacy found a new dimension through the rise of the Carolingian Empire. My dear friend, the story of the Frankish kingdom is a unique example of how a barbarian people transformed into an empire. The process began with Clovis's conversion to Christianity, and through the wisdom and vision of his successors, led to the creation of Europe's most powerful state. This kingdom did not just expand its borders, but also built a cultural and administrative model, one that would influence European history for centuries. Now take a moment to pause and reflect. Within every line of this great story is a lesson, and within each victory, a hope. Should we not remember the golden age of the Frankish kingdom and the foundation of the Carolingian dynasty? Ah, don't you think history is a treasure for those who know how to remember it? Ah, my dear friend, now I shall take you into the intricate and fascinating web of relationships between the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as Byzantium, and the Barbarian Kingdoms. This chapter of history is filled with diplomacy, war, alliances, and betrayals. A game played endlessly on a chessboard. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Byzantium, or the Eastern Roman Empire, not only had to defend its own borders, but also had to struggle against the invasions of the barbarian kingdoms spreading across Europe. Yet the strength of Byzantium was not just in its sword. They were masters of the art of diplomacy as well. Byzantium frequently employed a divide and rule strategy in its relations with the barbarian kingdoms. For instance, they formed alliances between groups like the Visigoths and Ostrogoths, or played them against each other to ensure their own security. Byzantine ambassadors would often appear in the courts of barbarian kings, seeking friendship through gifts and gold. However, these friendships were often fragile, as the barbarian kingdoms, while fearing Byzantium's power, were fiercely protective of their independence. One of the greatest Byzantine leaders, Emperor Justinian, perfected this art of diplomacy. For example, while negotiating with the Ostrogoths, he simultaneously supported the Visigoths, an intricate political strategy. Justinian's desire to turn barbarian kings into puppets of Byzantium was part of his effort to reconquer Italy and the former Western Roman territories. However, these efforts often met with strong resistance on the battlefield. The relationship between Byzantium and the barbarian kingdoms was not solely diplomatic or military. It also involved deep cultural exchanges. Particularly the Ostrogoths and Visigoths had inherited Roman culture, blending it with their own traditions. The interactions with Byzantium added another layer to this cultural amalgamation. Byzantine artists, architects, and craftsmen frequently worked in the courts of barbarian kings. One can see Byzantine influences in Gothic architecture. Moreover, the administrative techniques learned from Byzantium helped these barbarian kingdoms solidify their rule. For example, the Byzantine legal system served as a key inspiration in shaping laws such as the Visigothic laws of Alaric. And now think about trade routes. Byzantium was a bridge between Europe and Asia. The barbarian kingdoms became wealthy by taking advantage of Byzantium's position along the famous Silk Road. This trade not only carried goods but also ideas. The barbarian peoples learned much from Byzantium in religion, art, and science. Christianity, in particular, spread among the barbarian kingdoms through Byzantium and became a unifying force. Of course, these relationships were not one-sided. The barbarian peoples also had an impact on Byzantium. Did you know that barbarian warriors served in the Byzantine army as foederati? These warriors from the Huns, Goths, and Franks formed some of the most effective units of the Byzantine military. However, this also posed a danger. Sometimes these soldiers, loyal to their own peoples, did not hesitate to pursue their own interests, even against Byzantium. My dear friend, the relationship between Byzantium and the barbarian kingdoms is one of the most complex and yet most enlightening stories in history. Both sides influenced each other and both transformed each other. Byzantium drew the barbarian peoples into the realm of civilization, while the barbarians injected vitality into Byzantium. Isn't it fascinating? History is not just about wars. Such interactions reveal how civilizations were shaped. Understanding the dance between Byzantium and the Barbarian Kingdoms can still help us learn lessons from the past. So, my friend, let us always remember this story and keep this unique page of history alive in our memories. My dear friend. Now, let me take you to those chaotic yet profoundly enlightening days after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, where Europe began to reshape itself. The barbarian kingdoms not only rose from the ruins of Rome, but they also became the architects of a political and social order that laid the foundations for modern Europe. This story is one of a world rebuilt in the shadow of swords. The fall of the Roman Empire plunged Europe into a great power vacuum. When the political unity that the empire provided ended, the barbarian kingdoms emerged to fill this void. Peoples such as the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Franks, Burgundians, and Anglo-Saxons began to establish their own kingdoms on the remains of Rome, starting to redraw Europe's map. However, unlike the centralized power of Rome, this new map was fragmented and local in structure. As the barbarian kingdoms established their rule on the former Roman lands, regional kingdoms began to rise. This process transformed Europe into a mosaic of competing political units. This mosaic, while leading to chaos and conflicts, also paved the way for the strengthening of local governance and the foundations of the feudal system. Feudalism, the unique social and political system that shaped Europe throughout the Middle Ages. The seeds of this system were sown during the barbarian kingdoms. When Rome's centralized authority collapsed, people sought protection and stability. The barbarian kings, to meet this need, formed alliances with local leaders and developed a system of service and loyalty. The core of this system was based on land ownership. Kings allocated lands to vassal lords, who in return provided military support and loyalty. These early traces of the feudal system came directly from the governance of the barbarian kingdoms. Particularly, the Frankish kingdom played a critical role in the development of feudalism. Clovis and his successors shaped Europe's political landscape through the bonds they formed with local lords. The political fragmentation caused by the fall of the Roman Empire had a profound impact on Europe. The new order created by the barbarian kingdoms strengthened local autonomy, but also prevented the formation of a long-lasting unified authority. However, this fragmentation laid the foundation for Europe's unique cultural and political diversity. Each barbarian kingdom blended its cultural heritage with Rome's legacy, developing different forms of governance and legal systems. This diversity played a decisive role in the emergence of the modern European nation-states. For example, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms laid the foundations of England, while the Franks established the political infrastructure of what would become France. Another significant impact of the barbarian kingdoms was the increasing role of the Church in European politics. Christianity spread rapidly among the barbarian peoples, and the Church became a unifying force in this new order. Kings sought the Church's support to legitimize their authority, while the Church played an essential role in shaping this new political and social structure. My dear friend, understanding how the barbarian kingdoms shaped the political map of post-Roman Europe means witnessing one of history's most crucial transformation processes. This era is one where a new order was born from the chaos, and different cultures came together to lay the foundations for modern Europe. Barbarian kingdoms became an inseparable part of European history, not only through war and the sword, but also through their contributions to governance and culture. Today, the roots of the borders that separate Europe's different nations stretch back to these barbarian kingdoms. So, let us remember this story, and never forget that the barbarians were not only a destructive force, but also a creative one. My dear friend, as we look back at this complex yet fascinating period in history, I feel how important it is to carry the lessons of the past into the present. Now let us take a breath, for there are more stories waiting for us.
Indeed, you, my dear friend.
Today we are about to journey to a turning point in history. We've talked about how the barbarian kingdoms shaped Europe after the fall of Rome. But, as with every story, there comes a time for these kingdoms to exit the stage. The process by which the barbarian identity gave way to the new order of Christian Europe was hastened by the rise of the Carolingian Empire, which laid the foundation for medieval Europe. Let's look behind the scenes of this transformation together. One of the key players in the end of the barbarian kingdoms was the Carolingian Empire. The transition from the Merovingian to the Carolingian dynasty in the Frankish kingdom marked a period of reunification and centralization efforts in Europe. Charlemagne, the architect of this shift, was not only a king, but also the founder of a new European order. When Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans by the Pope in 800, it was not merely a change in title. It symbolized the end of the political independence of the barbarian kingdoms and the beginning of a new authority. Charlemagne's armies spread across Europe, conquering or integrating the remnants of the barbarian kingdoms. The Visigoths in Spain, the Lombards in Italy, and the Saxons in the north were all subdued under the pressure of the Carolingian forces. However, Charlemagne's true success lay not just in military conquest, but in shaping Europe through a cultural renaissance. The old barbarian identity began to fade, replaced by a European identity intertwined with Christianity. The Carolingian Renaissance, with its reforms in education, art, and law, infused the foundations of Christian Europe with the legacy of the barbarian kingdoms. My dear friend, the history of the barbarian peoples is not just a tale of war and conquest. These peoples blended what they learned from Rome with their own cultures to lay the groundwork for Europe. Yet, during the Carolingian period, the barbarian identity gradually dissolved. This was not a forced transformation, but one that took place over time. Christianity was the most significant factor in transforming the identity of the barbarian peoples. Many of the pagan barbarian kings in the final days of Rome adopted Christianity and gave their people a new direction. Christianity became not only a religious bond, but also a source of political power. The authority of the church became one of the cornerstones of the king's legitimacy. Kings were no longer seen as barbarian warrior leaders, but as representatives of God on earth. This transformation also affected the traditional tribal structures of the barbarian peoples. As local communities became part of larger political entities, the foundations of the feudal system were strengthened. The barbarian identity gradually gave way to the new order of Christian Europe. My friend, the end of the barbarian kingdoms opened the door to a new era in European history. This era is the Middle Ages. The legacy of the barbarian peoples lived on in the political, cultural, and social structure of medieval Europe. The feudal system, the power of the church, the authority of local lords, and central empires are all part of this legacy. As for the empire, although the Carolingian Empire fragmented quickly, it forever changed Europe's political map and cultural identity. This fragmentation marked the beginning of the long path toward the emergence of modern European nation-states. The barbarian kingdoms were not just a destructive force, they were a creative one. In Europe's turbulent history, their contributions symbolize both struggles and rebirth. Fin Fradu. My dear friend, our journey through this fascinating period of history concludes here. We have seen how the barbarian kingdoms, born from the collapse of the Roman Empire, shaped Europe, and how they eventually gave way to the complex and captivating order of the Middle Ages. This story is not just a reflection of the past, but also of the present. Because history is not only for learning, it is for reflection. The story of the barbarian peoples reminds us that from challenges, a new world can emerge. Now, my friend, let us take a breath in this journey through history, but remember, every ending is not a conclusion. Rather, it is the beginning of a new story. In our next conversation, we'll shine a light on another corner of history. For now, farewell, and never forget, History always whispers to us, if only we listen carefully. Symphony sounds ahead, history says, if only we listen carefully.